GRIC is the Greater Minnesota Futures Project that started, I would say, approximately this time last year. Has yielded a few interesting concepts. One has been advanced to the Planning Commission, and I'll let Tim or Craig say more about that. Some concepts that further visualize what it would be like if Highway 60 was rerouted off of Interstate Bridge through what we call the athletic fields. Obviously, that would result in relocating those fields and looking at the development of that parcel. But they've gotten to the level of concept drawing. Those concept drawings have made their way to the Planning Commission for some thought and consideration, and casually to the Port Authority, although they haven't made it to their agenda formally. And also, there will be a bike share launch on June 14th, which is very exciting. This is, again, a SHIP partnership, SHIP grant funds, as well as a tremendous amount of leadership from the city's Public Works Department, has led to a public bike share. Those bikes are going to be under Heritage Park, and that launch, and everyone is welcome, is June 14th. That's a Friday from 5 to 7 p.m. There'll be a lot of fun activities planned, and that is right before River Junction's Arts Council's first Meet Me Under the Bridge concert. So those two are paired together on June 14th. I think that's all for me. Do we have committee reports? Can I start on the left side? Can I start with you, John, from Port Authority?
Certainly. The Port Authority postponed its meeting for for May, until the 29th, so it would have been the last Tuesday of the month. This is 7 o'clock. The agenda really, we talked a lot about a recent EDA loan that we've done for a local business. It's still in the process of paperwork, making sure that we've got all of our I's dotted and T's crossed. And I see today we just got some of that paperwork from the attorney that's going to be doing the work on that. So that's good. We talked about JPN Investments, and that's the property out, the blue buildings, the Belcher buildings out in the industrial park. We had a EDA loan on that, and we are in the process of trying to collect that, and we're still unsettled about how that's going to work. We talked about downtown economic development, and we're going to do some pre-work before we start to talk about any kind of development. So we're coming up with some ideas, some independent ideas about how we might like to package or get a development plan put together for downtown. So more to follow on that. We are all tasked at the Port Authority with coming up with some ideas for that. So we'll present all those at the next Port Authority meeting. Otherwise, that's about it.
Related to that, you're just jogging my memory. I attended the CETA annual meeting, which was excellent. Yeah, it was excellent, and it was great to see what other communities are doing with the assistance of CETA, either through a sort of a consulting arrangement or even with the representatives of cities. And it was important to see specifics. I think versus sort of potential concepts, to see specific examples that are working in communities that are either similar to Wabasha or at least regional and might have some potential benefit. One that drew my attention was Fillmore County looking at recreation mapping and the impact of it economically. And so they're doing some GIS mapping that they believe might serve as a state model due to the impact of, economic impact of recreation as well as livability. So great. Look forward to it.
It was good. And actually CETA was going to be on the agenda, but we tabled them until the coming months.
Yeah.
So.
Anything from
utilities? No, nothing of note.
All right. And from planning?
So as you did give an update on our planning meeting from last month, we did have a couple, I think it was 4 drawings of potential routing of the bridge road through the athletic field and kind of what are the advantages of each one. So we kind of came up with a concept with what we were looking for, what was the best concept of getting the flow of traffic through, and then we also talked about what do we do with the ball fields, the volleyball courts, and so on and so forth. So I believe Christy's bringing that forth to this council meeting sometime in the future. So if anybody has any questions, they surely can reach out for me.
Okay, sounds good. And Parks, do you have anything you want to share with Council, Tony?
Evening, everyone. Park Board did not meet. I did not have time to get agenda or the information together for them, so I asked them to hold off for a month. Update on the splash pad. I received one email a couple weeks ago saying that they're behind with all their other projects, so they set us back a week. And email today saying they're gonna put us back another week. So instead of being open for last Saturday, it's gonna be a couple weeks from now. So, it's kind of the weather thing. Everybody knows what's been going on. They're getting set back on their projects and we're getting set back. So, good news for the gentleman that was asking for the boat cleaning station. We actually collaborated with Wabasha County last year on securing a boat cleaning station. And it's a trailer, it's on a trailer and you can move it around, but also you can crank it and set it down on the ground so it's somewhat stationary. So that's gonna be down at Ike's Park as soon as the water goes down, which will probably be never. But that's all set up.
Good time for planning.
Yeah, solar powered, doesn't cost us anything. It's grant funded. And basically we have to just check on a giant vacuum cleaner and an air compressor on it. We just have to keep an eye on if there's tools missing or anything like that. Everything's cable attached so they can't run off with it. But there'll be a place where people can pull up with their boats right out of the launch. And we're gonna have painted symbols on the ground, boat cleaning station. And so that's a pretty good deal there. As far as the the fish cleaning house, that's in our park plan for possible future, but you know, it all depends on money and interest and donations. And we've talked, Chad and I have talked about getting some groups together to donate some labor towards it. So there's a lot of different ideas out there, but it's in our future park plan. Street Commission met today. We talked about a driveway issue along the mill and overlay project, and the homeowner asked to have their driveway fixed, and it was actually low by the street. And we talked, and I got a recommendation from Brian, the city engineer. Obviously we're not touching driveways on this project. We're doing the mill and overlay. If we're gonna fix somebody's driveway, we're gonna end up fixing more, and obviously that's not until we do a concrete curb and gutter and we go back to the right-of-way line and repair everything. So I'm gonna contact them tomorrow and tell them, you know, that if they want it fixed, they're gonna have to do it on their own project. But I'll give them the contacts for the paving crew and different things like that. So I gave them an update from the last city council meeting about the street project, the bids, the assessment, and we talked through that, and that was about it.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. Did I miss anybody? All right, I know Darren is sometimes here. He sent some pretty spectacular storm photos from the fire storm watchers, which I hope are in our past, so. So that's for committee review. Chad's out today on PTO. From an administrator's report standpoint, he did share with city staff the St. Jude fishing tournament has been canceled for the second time, unfortunately, due to high water. Obviously, safety is of utmost concern, so they're waiting to hear if they will reschedule. Budget worksheets are currently going out to department heads. And this is a good reminder, I learned about this a long time ago and I knew I would forget. There is a new law effective August 1st, which is this is a state law, hands-free cell phone use. So that means no texting, no holding your phone. I'm sure there's plenty of information available to us on the web, but just a reminder that takes effect August 1st. And then, do you want to say anything about updating personnel policy?
We will be
Just
working
in the process of it,
yes,
okay.
we're in the
So the
process.
personnel policy is being updated for city employees, and employees will be given information on updated and new procedures. And then I think I can hold these other two until we speak to the strict. All right, so we have before us the consent agenda with two items requested to be removed. So we have the approval of our May 7th regular minutes. We have approval of annual liquor licenses and 3-2 beer license renewals, and that full list is available in the part of the full agenda packet for those interested. We have a WK Chamber temporary on-sale liquor license application for Riverboat Days, St. Felix temporary on-sale liquor license application for a wedding, 2019 Hiawatha Land Transit Pool Service Agreement, and the warrants. The Hiawatha Land Transit Pool Service Agreement is for circulation to a set number of sites to pick up children to increase utilization of the city pool. Do we have a motion to approve the warrants?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We have a consent agenda passed with those two items moved to. So we have time for a public hearing for the Marina Lease Franchise Ordinance Amendment. This is the first reading of this ordinance, and I think just procedurally, we'll just give the individuals who've been tasked with the negotiation of this a time to make some comments, and then we'll invite public comment. Again, if you would come to the podium, state where you live, your name, and jot that down for the record. So we have the lease franchise agreement in the agenda packet. Do you have anything you want to share, high level?
Jeff, do you?
Not really, it is what it is.
Yeah,
I mean-
we've talked about it plenty. I guess maybe we could do some discussion
Sure.
with the council initially, and then we can have public input. Is that be
Yeah, and I guess
reasonable?
just, it's always good to kind of do the context. So the context is that through the 2018 annual year, calendar year, there was expiration of the lease agreement with the current operator holders, an extension of that agreement, and then a call from council to have a formal appraisal, a professional appraisal, marina appraisal was conducted and paid for by the city. We used that appraisal, which was exhaustive, in our deliberation about the negotiation, what council was comfortable with. And so negotiation has led to this agreement, which is, informally agreed to by the current operators. So we have that material in front of us, and we've all digested this a few times. Any comment by council?
I have, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so when we went through this last month or 2 months ago, it was a long and involved procedure, and our focus was on the price. And what we said is, we had the appraisal done, it was at 27.5, and through negotiations, we arrived at 5,000. And I guess in doing so, I kind of overlooked the term and termination, if that was in there, and I suppose it was. The term of 25 years seems excessive. The last term was for 10 years, and that seems reasonable to me.
There is, in the agreement, there is a provision, I think it's section 2.4, that allows the termination of 10 years.
So I can just speak to it briefly. I had the same feeling as you had. And
That's
it was negotiated informally at the last meeting for 25 years, but I would advise you to be very careful about a 25-year agreement. A lot can change in 25 years. And so we left it as 25 years, but added an additional termination clause that would allow either party to terminate the agreement after 10 years for any reason. So essentially, you're 10 years, but if the agreement is functioning, you could keep it. And so that's how it's structured to address that concern. I agree. I think without getting too deep into it, I think there's a lot of risk with a 25-year agreement.
For both parties.
Yeah. So it gives us that window after 10 years, and from there, it's essentially year to year.
And one other thing I had was clause 3.2, the fee adjustment based on low slip occupancy. So if the total number of boat slips rented falls below 65% of the capacity, then there's a 15% deduction in the franchise fee. And so I'm not sure why we would want to agree to that. And I really don't like that part of it. I think there could be a number of reasons. There could be high water, like we have now, but that's an act of nature. There could be mismanagement. There could be other reasons. Maybe there's a better marina somewhere down the line that everybody's going to. But I don't think we should have that in there.
Yeah, I understand this is somewhat controversial, and I'm totally open for discussion about it. The intent was to ensure that when we looked at this, let me back up a little. When we looked at this is a little different in that a lot of those folks that are leasing slips or choose to use that marina are residents of Wabasha. So we were trying to look out for them too, trying to ensure there's going to be an availability of a functioning marina. And if there was an economic downturn, how do we ensure that marina stays open and operating for our citizens as well? So that was kind of where that played in. And in the same fashion, I mean, it can go back to where it was as that number increased, you know, if there was something like that to happen. That's kind of the gist of why that was, ended up in there. You know,
Still not really sold on it.
yeah, and that's okay, that's what's in there.
Dean, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, well, I had the same concerns that Craig had on the 25 and on 3.2, and then I have one other concern on 3.4. The additional fee of $15,000 for this year. Does that add up to 48,000 or whatever
It does not, it adds up to 25.
for this year?
Yeah, for the year that they're essentially in
A new
right
agreement.
now. Yeah, I know.
Right, but,
Yes, and I know what you're gonna
Well,
say.
well, no, you don't.
Okay.
I just
You
want
will after you say it.
That's paid in full. this
Oh,
coming
okay.
year, so.
I know there was discussion about, you know, that they would be a holdover tenant, and so, you know, would look for the 43,000. After further discussion with the operators and trying to, come to a good even agreement, we agreed that we would just include that this year at the same fees as the years going forward. So it'll be a 25,000, there'll be a $15,000 payment to get them through this year, and then it goes forward.
So if I understand it, this past year is the first functioning year of the agreement?
Theoretically.
Okay.
So my concerns were 2.1 and 3.2, and on 3.2, I don't like it either, that 65% at all. And the other thing I didn't like about it was the 15%. If anything, I thought that should be the 2%, because we increase 2% every year. I don't know why we have a 50% reduction on that. So, but I don't like that whole section, 3.2.
Okay. And one of the other things that's still a topic of discussion, is, 1.3.1. And, our intent with this is that we want to be able to store the city dock, you know, in the marina on the city-controlled side of the marina, if you will. Be that, you know, the upriver end of Beach Park or around the corner or something. But one of the issues at hand, and we don't have any documentation about this, is that certainly in open waters, there has to be a 75-foot navigable channel, right? And we don't have any documentation about that yet. And the concern that the operators has is that if we store it or something is left there permanent, say on the campground side, inside the marina, you know, we're talking about on our controlled side, that would kind of impinge upon their ability to get in and out of there. So we talked about maybe identifying that the intent is to store the city dock there for the off-season, something like that, as opposed to how, and I think it'd be just additional language, it wouldn't be anything more. To just say that the dock would be there, because our intent isn't to build more docks. Our intent is to store the dock that we already have. So I don't know how we can, Mike, I'm looking at you, how we can maybe say something like season known as November through April.
We can do that. I mean, we went through several drafts of that section,
Yeah.
and I had drafted it a different way than you see it today, where basically, you know, it was more clear that we could just store things. I think the concern is that you can't have unlimited storage in the water, because then it would be, I would probably agree, I mean, I don't know enough about it, but if the city had unfettered right to store things in the river during the off-season, it could become a safety issue or.
Why don't we do this?
Oh, there's no navigation.
How big is it, long is the dock?
Right.
What?
How long is that dock?
Tony, how long is the city dock? 75 feet, maybe?
And I'd have to guess at it, but I wanted to, the one thing you guys are talking about is the room in between the docks to travel. When I put that own dock in there on beach side, I had to measure from their nearest corner to that one, and there was plenty of room.
Yeah, there is for those, yeah.
Yeah, so,
So I think the issue that, I'm sorry, Dean, you can go ahead.
Well, I'm looking at, Exhibit C. We have the ramp over there with the city dock already there. Why don't we just butt that city dock from the Eagle Center right up next to that? And then when the water thaws out, you pull it out.
Well, we have a city-owned lot right on that corner, too.
Well, I think the concern, Jeff had brought up a concern that the cost of removing the dock and putting it back in, that would cost money, and so we didn't want to outlay. I mean, the real concern with this whole section was we wanted to keep the dock where they've currently been storing it. They can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're currently storing it in the river over the winter. And so that's already, you just want to continue to do what they've already been doing. And there was concern that if we were forced to remove the dock and store it where you're talking about or somewhere else on dry land, it would cost the city. Is that a fair?
Yeah, you know,
Analysis.
the most convenient way is to leave it in the water,
Right.
tie it up on the shoreline.
Why
And
can't we just
the
put
idea-
it
Right
on
up
public
on
ramp?
Beach Park, that's
Yeah,
the-
that's, you know,
Yeah.
one of the problems with Beach Park is on the city-controlled side of Beach Park, it's somewhat of a rocky shoreline. So, I mean, there would have to be some provisions about that, but the idea that our intent is to simply store the dock, our intent is not
Not
to
to build.
build anything more. And our intent is to store the dock in the off-season, so
So I
that's
go
all there
back
is.
to the public ramp in Exhibit C. Why can't we just pull it in there? And when the ice is out, we pull it out.
It's,
That would work too.
that
I
would
guess.
work too.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a bit of a stretch to get a drug back in there. They're kind of a bear to move around, so,
You were looking, if I understand, I mean, you're looking to create some protection for the existing practice
yes.
as written in the agreement, so that
yes.
that doesn't
But-
go away
But
as
to
an option.
ensure that the operators aren't gonna have to be worried about anything that's permanent or left in
Right,
the water.
right.
In the on-season.
So as long as we're cleaning stuff up, there's 3 city lots down there. And one of them is adjacent to Shields Avenue, and one of them is adjacent to that house with the red roof. And one of them is adjacent to Third Street. So there are some boats, trailers parked there, and there are also some boats parked there. The boats are wrapped in white plastic. The boats next to the red house aren't there right now. They were there in a previous photo from Google. So I'm wondering, are those being used by the marina? And if they are, should we have them included in Exhibit A? So we know exactly what land is being used and what land isn't being used?
It would make some sense.
That makes sense to me, I just don't have enough factual
Familiarity,
knowledge of
right.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it right here. What you're talking about, here and here.
Yeah,
And-
here and here,
yep.
and then there's one by this red house.
Yeah, yep. Yep, and I've seen that too. I'm glad out, 'cause yeah, I don't see it here.
So Craig, are you saying that on the area shaded in gray, that this land you're talking about is not shaded in gray on Exhibit A?
Exhibit A, right, it's not shaded in gray.
So it's not then part of the property we're franchising to them currently, under the current?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not even on the map for that one parcel B.
It would be directly across from, parcel, what, 27.00140.03. Be directly across the road there, 2 of the lots.
Third Street, yeah. So I'm just saying, if those are city-owned lots according to Beacon, and there's boats parked on them according to the Google photos, so we should declare if that's part of this agreement,
Well, it isn't.
and if it isn't, Right now, it isn't. If it isn't part of the agreement, then the boats shouldn't be on there. Maybe they're fishing boat trailers that somebody's temporarily storing there, you know, like they temporarily store trailers along, or boats along the Mississippi River. I don't know, however you wanna deal with that.
Well, in Exhibit C, you can see that there's a tarped boat in that one parcel you're talking about right
Yep,
there.
Yep. Yeah,
White one right there.
yeah.
Yep. So you can clearly see in Exhibit C that it's being used by the harbor there. But it's not
It's
on
there, it's there
Exhibit
today, it's
A.
there today, yeah.
Yeah.
You just take a look at that and include them?
Well, that's fine if the city owns them and you're gonna, so basically what you're saying is you wanna franchise that land to the marina operators under the same terms as the agreement that you end up
If they're
drafting.
gonna be using them, I would think you'd want it in the franchise, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why they're covered by insurance, that, the insurance certificate, I mean, I didn't know that existed, so that's important, I think. Or the other option is they can remove the items from the lot and not occupy it and leave the agreement the same, so those would be the two.
Then that becomes a really hard place to police, you know, because that little section right there, a lot of the people that use the dock or the ramp that's in the marina,
Right.
it's a public ramp, park their boats and cars and trailers there.
And are we saying that that's like, they park, when you say park them there, do you mean that they leave them there over the winter?
No.
No.
during
Day.
use in
During the day.
summer,
Got it.
During the season.
Now Parkside does use that, and we can see that in this aerial, you know, for storage in
When
the
you-
off-season.
Okay, so if in the off-season, they do store
Yeah.
items on city
Yeah.
property, and in the on-season, people just park there.
Yeah, people does,
Public and,
yeah.
Yeah, that should be included, I would say. I mean, because then you're covered by insurance and the indemnification clauses. I mean, that way, they're in charge of the whole thing, they have to maintain it.
Yep.
And it's really part and parcel of their business. I mean, I didn't know that, so
Yeah.
we should include that then.
That's all I have.
Pick up.
Anything further, Brian?
I was just gonna ask, where did the 65% clause come from? Was that a owner requested thing or something the city threw in?
I think we just suggested that to be able to share, and if the economy goes to hell, we know, the marina's important to the town, so maybe we should have shared a little bit into the operation of the marina, you know, the success of the marina.
Yeah.
We just, you know, said, we'll throw that in there maybe to sweeten the deal a little bit, or get them
Okay.
to,
In the interest of the public.
yes.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with, just because I think when you're running a business like this, it's in your best interest to fill the spot. I don't think they would purposely make their census below 65% to get some kind of discount, so, and,
No, I don't think that, but I think we could be giving them a discount when there's other reasons that may account for that.
Well, if the council does agree with 3.2, I'm opposed to it. I would hope that you guys would consider reducing that 15% down to a smaller percentage.
I'm comfortable with any percentage,
Yeah.
really. It's a matter of negotiation at that point, with the owner, what you put it at.
And so I'd point out one other clause that relates to that, is in section 2.2, termination by the city, parenthetical or number 5 underneath that section. The city, the agreement can be terminated by the city for all those reasons, and number 5 says, in the event of a reduction of the franchise fee under section 3.2 of the agreement for 2 consecutive years. So if they did claim that in 2 consecutive years, you could then give them a termination notice and renegotiate it. And I mean, I had concerns about that section too, that's why I added that, to give you some ability, you know, because kind of the way I thought of it was, well, this is the municipal marina, I mean, you want it to be well-run, and so if it's consistently falling below occupancy rates, is there other issues where you can't terminate it for another reason? You'd wanna have that, but, you know, I think that was mentioned, I mean, my recollection of this is that was mentioned when they had the last meeting, when they were here, and it was discussed as either that, giving them a reduction of the fee, if occupancy fell below a certain, level or amount, or in the alternative, letting them cancel or terminate the agreement if it fell below a certain amount. And this is just what was negotiated, you know. Yeah, I mean, that's all I can say about it.
So, after 10 years, either party can terminate this.
Yeah.
So this, you're saying if that 3.2 kicks in before the first 10 years are out, then we could, 2 years in a row, we could
Yeah.
terminate it
Yep.
for that.
Yeah, I added that in because I didn't feel comfortable without something. Because if they're consistently reducing it every single year,
Yeah.
well, what the heck? I mean, something's wrong then, and we gotta be able to analyze that and get out if we need to get out.
Then it's probably not an economy issue, it's probably an operator issue.
Yeah.
Well, that's my theory, but I don't know.
Tony has data for us, I can tell.
Oh, one thing I noticed in here, the franchise shall routine daily maintenance throughout the property, including but not limited to picking up trash, debris, and perform general maintenance. And then on 4110, in order to provide a clean, safe, sanitary environment, the franchise shall provide trash and recycling containers. So we've been doing that for years, so that'll save us
Right.
$200 to $300 a month for, what, 6 months? So there's a little offset there. And then the only thing I didn't, did you guys talk about the parking lot, the maintenance of the blacktop? Okay.
Parking
That's
lot, no,
city-
but street, yes. I mean, it's still, you grade the street just like you graded all the other streets, and we'll maintain that
Sure.
street as we would any other street.
But the parking lot is theirs.
Is theirs.
To okay.
There's on city property, right?
Yeah, because they're leasing it, so it's an improvement that they have to.
So my only other question, and I agree with Craig and Dean about 3.2, I don't like it. My question is what other wording, did we just clean up the wording for the rest of this? Is it really all like,
No, I redrafted it though.
you just
Yeah, I
redrafted,
redrafted it,
completely
yeah.
redrafted from the old one?
Yeah.
Okay,
And so the first page of the agreement, what it says is at the title of your ordinance, it says, Section 1, which is adopted by the city of Wabasha, January 4th, 2008, is hereby repealed, replaced, and superseded in its entirety, and replaced by this one. So that's in that first page, Section 1. And so that old one will have, the old one is already expired. So
yeah,
it doesn't
no,
have-
but I was just more concerned that we kept a lot of the content, we just cleaned up the wording, correct, or not?
Well,
Yes and no?
yes and no. I mean, I had the committee look
Okay.
at that, for example, what Tony was just reading off. You know, we do a lot of, use and maintenance
Yep.
agreements, our firm does, and it would be a standard term in an agreement like that to require the franchisee or the lessee, as the case may be, to do the trash.
Okay.
I mean, they're of the property, they're running a business there, they ought to have trash cans and things like that. And so I kind of cleaned it up, and then the insurance section was changed and needed to be changed. It was based on old law, the statute's been changed
Okay.
3 times since that.
So it's a thorough
Okay, perfect,
revision.
that's all I need to know. All right.
I think the main point there is we went back and forth with them, and they've agreed to all of this, with the exception of section 1.3.1. That was the last thing, and we just didn't have time, so we just published the ordinance, and then.
Okay.
So that's still kind of,
A hearing.
Okay.
Anything further? Does anybody who's not in favor of section 3.2 have an explicit recommendation, either to strike it or adjust it?
My opinion would be to strike it, but I'm open to discussion on it.
Strike it.
I mean, I think we're getting into the realm of, well, yeah, it could be economic, it could be business, it could be social, I mean, it could be just about 1,000 other reasons why it's going below. I mean, I'm happy to see that we have those safeguards in there, about 2 years, we could terminate it and so on, so even, but my opinion would be to strike it. And I'm not a big fan of the 25 years, but having that 10-year kind of out, basically, I think would be helpful. I hope that we don't have to use it because it's a booming business type of thing. I don't,
That was the intent, is if there's nothing wrong, we've got an agreement in place. If we've got a problem with it, we have a way
would
out.
we just terminate it completely, or would we negotiate whatever we felt differently?
well, of course, that's what would happen. I mean, in theory, whoever your attorney is, if it's me, we would send him a letter and,
Start the,
if there needed to be an amendment, you could propose an amendment, and if they don't agree, then you could terminate it.
Okay, all right.
Like that. I mean, you can always.
I like the safeguards we have in there. I mean, I think it's worthwhile to keep those all in there. just because it gives us a little out, and both parties a little out, so.
Well, without that, I mean, I wouldn't advise you do that 3.2 without that clause.
Yeah.
Just because otherwise it could turn into all the, and for what, like you say, for whatever reason, you get this written notice every year that says they're below occupancy.
Yeah.
And then essentially the franchise fee's been reduced by considerably too, like Dean's pointed out.
Any
I'm
further-
still struggling with 2.1 with 25 years, even with that additional, what section was it?
2.4.
2.4. I would like to see it 25, at least down to 15.
Some of the other marinas that do have 25-year leases. It's not uncommon.
Yeah, I'm just not comfortable with that.
How I looked at it initially it was either gonna be 4 or 5-year
Yeah.
increments. And so 25 was our maximum legal allowable number, and so we just went with that. I guess it's arbitrary to agree, but we had information to back up that other marinas do that as well. And again, I'll go back to that, our intent was, is that if everything is fine, then we don't need to renegotiate, we don't need to do anything, you know? And if there is an issue, we'll know it and we can make a change after 10 years. So so as an operator, they're comfortable in the idea that they have a secure place to operate their business for 10 years. It's up to them to make sure that after that, or, you know, that it continues down that path. You know, or they might wanna get, and that gives them that out as well. It just, what it does is it keeps that framework of the agreement in place, you know.
So, yeah, I don't know that I wanna renegotiate a lease every 10 years, but under this agreement, so after 11 years, can they get out?
After the 10th franchise year, it's in section, I can read it to the council. So
Yeah.
it's additional, 2.4 additional termination provisions, notwithstanding any provision of this agreement may be terminated by the city or franchisee, one, by mutual agreement of the parties, that means if you both agree, or two, by either party upon that party's election and without the occurrence of any condition after April 15, 2029, which is the end of the 10th franchise year. So it's not after 11 years, it's anytime after 10 years. So
Yeah,
it could be
anytime after 10 years.
10
So
years plus 1 month, 10 years plus 2
what I'm
months.
thinking is that gonna give us enough time to react if they decide to get out? Would we be more comfortable, I'm just asking the question, would we be more comfortable having a 10-year lease and then having that renewed for another 10 years? And then we would know that we've got that locked in for another 10 years. Rather than having them saying, well,
Between years
not
10 and
working out, we'll
25.
pull out.
I see what
Yeah,
you mean.
well, I think that, they're the ones with all the investment, right?
Yeah.
It's all their infrastructure.
Yeah,
So for them to simply think that they're gonna decide to pull out,
right.
you know, it would be pretty obvious before that 10 years that something wrong. Otherwise, they'd wanna stay. Or they'd wanna have that opportunity to maybe retire from the business and sell the business. And so they'd have some kind of an agreement going forward to be able to sell that business as well. So, you know,
I agree, it doesn't seem probable, but nevertheless,
yeah.
a lot of things don't.
So that's kinda why it was in there.
I hear in the spirit of this, correct me if I'm wrong, this desire not for the city to have the upper hand in negotiating at any time that we see fit, but for there to be something that allows for sufficient security that we have a functioning municipal marina.
Yep.
And an ability to act if we don't see that as
Right.
the case. Anything further from council? I think we probably have members of the public that want to comment. Okay. We can, it's formally a hearing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll note
To
the
get open
time.
public, yeah.
Yeah. Members of the public, again, if you'd like to join us, we would really welcome your participation. If you'd come to the podium, state your name and address, and if you'd jot it down for the record, thank you. There's a sign-in sheet right at the podium. So we'll open the hearing at 7:50.
Good evening. My name is Roland Hall. I live with Mickey at 1417 River Drive South in Wabasha. Madam Mayor, council members, staff. Stephen Covey built an empire on a book, The 7 Basic Habits of Highly Successful People. The 5th basic habit is seek first, understand, and then to be understood. I'm here tonight to seek understanding of the proposed marina lease. I will have 5 questions at the end of my presentation. Some points. The 2008 to 2018 lease was for $40,000 the first 5 years and $43,750 for the past 5 years. So in 2017, the city received $43,750. Now it's proposed to start a new lease at $25,000 with a 2% annual increase. Let me share some numbers. At the end of 5 years, the lease number would be $27,626.97. At the end of 10 years, it would be $30,529. At the end of 15, $33,738. At the end of 20 years, $37,283. And finally, in the 25th year, the lease payment would be $41,200. Now, with your proposed lease in your 25th year, the city would be receiving $2,550 less than it did in 2017. 25 years later, and not even equal to 2017. Item 2 shows the maximum annual increase of 2%. There are also provisions that if the CPI is lower, the annual increase is lower. Also, if the marina isn't at 65% full, annual fee can be reduced. What if the marina had 80% or higher occupancy? Does the city get a dividend? Does the city get a bonus? What if the marina had 80% occupancy for 3 or 4 years and then had a 63% occupancy? Will they get a reduction? In the minutes of your April 15th special meeting with city and the franchisee, reference is made to the appraisal obtained by the city, and that fair market rent would be $27,500. I'm sure the city paid thousands of dollars for the appraisal. Why are the findings not being used? In those same minutes, it's reported that Council members Sulla and Friedmeier asked the franchisee 3 months ago to do their own appraisal, and that the franchisee asked for a 1-year lease in order to obtain their own appraisal. Mr. Wickersham asked if they could, and I'm quoting from the minutes, Mr. Wickersham asked if they could get a 1-year lease in place and they will move forward on getting an appraisal done instead of dragging the situation out. Mr. Wickersham said they didn't want to get an appraisal done at this point because they thought they could get something worked out, and that hasn't happened. Council members Sulla and Friedmeier recommended that Wickersham's get an appraisal 3 months prior, and it hasn't been done. Wickersham's stated everyone knows why this is dragged on for 4 months to begin with. My questions to the committee and to the council: who and how was it determined that $25,000 would be the starting lease fee? Why the 25-year lease versus the 1-year lease suggested by the Wickershams? And why no benefit to the city if the occupancy is higher than 65%? Again, Wickersham stated that everyone knows why this is dragged out for 4 months to begin with. I am one who does not know that, and I would know why it was dragged out. 5, does the city have a plan for replacing the lost revenue that will result as if this is adopted? And then, Mr. Attorney, on the way over, I was wondering, is this lease transferable, or can it be assigned?
It's, your mayor, former mayor, that's in the agreement. It's in the assignment section of the agreement. It says they have to seek the city's consent to assign the lease.
Okay.
Which cannot be unreasonably withheld. And so the way I've always viewed that, that's standard contract language, the way, I mean, this is for the council, not for the former mayor, but the way I've always viewed that is you can withhold consent if you have any good reason, and that good reason could be you don't like the subsequent marina operator that they choose for, you know, you have a pretty leeway to exercise that withholding consent,
Thank you.
so.
Can I just, before you leave, Mayor Hall, can you please restate the questions, who and why started at 25,000? I just want to make sure we address them. Where did the 25 start? Just at your points of question, I think I got 4 of them, not 5.
Okay.
Thanks.
My 5th was, does the city have a plan for replacing lost revenue as a result of the proposed lease?
So I got 5, so maybe I missed number 2. I had who and why was the starting point at 25,000, who decided and why? And I have, why is no benefit to the city if occupancy exceeds 65,000? And I have
65%.
65%, excuse me, and I have, does the city have a plan for replacing lost revenue if adopted? So I'm missing a 5th. Could it be number 2, your point number 2? I think I was listening, and not, which is what I try to do.
My hearing is not nearly as good as it was when I was 18 years old.
Speaking is excellent, but I wasn't fast enough. Sure, I can figure out which one I'm missing. Good, thank you. Yes, it was number 2. Why is the 25-year lease versus the 1-year lease as suggested by the Wickershams in the special meeting? Okay, so we can address the questions as they're outlined, or we can take further public comment and see if there's overlapping questions or furthering of the questions. I think that might be appropriate.
Typically in a public hearing, you would hear from the public and then
And then we'll
close
go
it
back.
and then
Yeah,
discuss.
we'll do that.
I
I
just-
think this is gonna be similar questions. We don't wanna be duplicative. Welcome to the podium. Thanks for your comments, Rollin. And questions?
Good evening. Martin Wilson, 3rd Ward, 20 Wilson, up on the hill. I'll just sign this in here. I was on the Port Authority back about 12, 13 years ago, and I was on it for about 10 or 12, 13 years, I believe. And I just kind of wanted to bring the council up to date on how we got to this point. Part of the problem is I'd been gone, I was out of the country a little bit, and I was gone for 2 months, so I just kept hearing pieces of this, and I couldn't understand how we got here. When I was on the Port Authority, we watched the contract, and we could see it was coming up for renewal. So instead of waiting for a year to talk about it, we did it 6 months ahead. And the lease rate at that time, I believe, was $7,500. And it had been that way for years, and nobody had addressed the lease. So we had Don Jacoby, myself, Charlie Bitcher was on the Port Authority at that time, and we started negotiations with, I can never remember his name, Wandro. And he was the owner of the marina at the time, and we got him to come to the meetings. And we talked about we got to increase the rates. And he agreed that we had to increase the rates. And it'd been there because a person that had been on the council also ran the marina for many years, and it just kind of got overlooked. As we go through the negotiations, come to light, he's selling it. And he's selling it to the Wickersham boys. Wickershams, I mean. So we're having this meeting, and all of a sudden, we're talking in numbers bigger than $40,000, and we're even had entered this up and down. We were actually thinking about taking a city operation. And then we discussed that, and then we got negotiating. All of a sudden, we've got Wandro, and he brings in the Wickersham boys, the Wickersham boys, and he's selling it to them. So, I mean, they sat there in these negotiations. And through the negotiations, in about 2 meetings, I know that they sat there, we had the rate at about $40,000 to $45,000. We agreed on $40,000. All 3 of them sat there and nodded their head, with the full knowing that after 10 years, it was going to be more money. And we had done that through John Lineweaver, who was on there, and he personally visited all the marinas up and down the river. We threw out the bottoms, we threw out the highs, and we thought that we had a fair and equitable price at $40,000, and everybody agreed to that. Now, I looked at the contract that you got here now, and when you talk about the 29 years, or the 25 years, which is actually going to be 26 years contract, I did a lot of contracts with Fortune 500 companies that never, I got a 15-year on a deal one time. Otherwise, you're talking 10, 5, 4. And this is kind of interesting for the attorney. In 1988, we quit using the CPI for increases because it's a political item now. Things come into the CPI, go out of the CPI. See, you have a stated increase. And that's what I thought, the CPI, that's incredible because you get the lower of the two. I mean, that's not good business. The other thing that's not good business is you wound up on the defense right away. You didn't start the negotiations for the contract before their expiration. Contracts that I've had, that when you got to the expiration, if you hadn't settled, you paid the next year's deal, and if we come up with a lower number, you got money back. But all of a sudden, when you don't do that, you're on the defense. And you guys have played defensive all the time. And Jeff and John, I feel sorry for you because the council threw you guys under the bus on this deal. And normally, the Port Authority, which, there's another thing, not to jump around, is you should read what the grant of the Port Authority is. It has a lot of wonderful powers that none of it's being used. And there's only about 4 or 5 port authorities in the state. We had to go get the vote of the legislature and everything to become that. And when we were going along on that, we were doing that. And the other goal we had is we're trying to get 500,000 reserved. This is, what's your reserve now? You've blown it.
We got 300.
You've blown most of it. And
We got 300 now.
I find that hard to believe the way you've gone through it, and then all the studies, and you're talking about doing this for $25,000. You spent $7,500 for an appraisal. You didn't get an appraisal. You got a due diligence. That's different than an appraisal. That's when you don't have business people on your port authority doing your negotiations. This is what you're going to wind up with, and it's not your fault. You guys done the yeoman's job. But you're starting from the bad side. And the council shouldn't have done it, the Port Authority should have done that, and then you get out of all this closed meeting stuff and everything, and it makes it a lot simpler. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Marty.
Thanks, Marty. See somebody else? Welcome.
I'm Charlie Brisher at 3 Buena Vista Drive in Wabasha. And this weekend, when I downloaded the franchise agreement from Parkside, it occurred to me that it seemed like I was reading an agreement that was written by the franchisee instead of the franchisor. Everything in it seemed to be aimed to their advantage. I was on the city council and the Port Authority at the time we approved this past 10-year agreement. And we had gone, as Marty had said, through a real process to come up with that number of 40,000. And I feel that number was good then, and it's still good now. I moved to Wabasha in 1998, and since then, the price of everything has gone up about double, whether it be fuel, insurance, groceries, my property taxes in that 20 years. In the same time, the lease agreement has gone up 10% in 10 years, which means it couldn't have been too bad from an aspect of that part of the business. I'm not sure how that 25,000 lease number was agreed upon to start with, but I've heard a lot in the conversation tonight that really helped me understand what was going on there. But when I looked at the marina, and I took Roland Hall there last winter, or actually this spring, winter lasted a long time. But anyway, I pointed out to the boats that were being stored on the city's land. And I says, Parkside Marina really isn't a marina without the city's to the water and without the land that goes along with it. So in reality, the only business they really have is a boat repair and maintenance business. The rest of it is do their income generating thing is what they derive from the city's property. That property has a lot higher value than I think your appraiser gave it because of the potential to make income from it. The appraiser probably viewed the property as marketable, what you could sell it for today. You know, up in northern Minnesota, the state paid $2,000 a foot for shoreline on Lake Vermilion to make a state park. I'm sure our value of our harbor there has that same kind of value because instead of being for recreation purposes, it's for business purposes. If you look at it from that aspect, I don't think that the 40,000 that we were asking for lease payment on there are in the terms that should increase it over the years is out of line. An example of how I saw the city being taken advantage of in the proposed agreement was the rate of increase that might occur with each year's payment. And the word that caught me was smaller of the CPI or the 2%. When I looked at that, I should have said the larger of, because people are making money if inflation is higher. And the city should get their part of it. It's for the taxpayers that way. Another one, the fee adjustment with that 65%. There's a number missing in the franchise agreement on that, and that is the number of slips this thing applies to. You should have that stated in there because otherwise the number of slips can be manipulated to make any number you want work with that cutback on the fee. So then further down in the document I saw in 4.1 about speed limit signs. Speed limits should be probably on the water controlled by the harbor master they propose in that 4.2, but the speed limits on the road should be, and that goes through there and the like, that should be for the city council to determine. If they need something, let come to the city council and get a sign to post it to what it should be, and our police department can help enforce it. But on the water, I don't think our police department belongs out there. So anyway, I believe that the fee amount in the last previous agreement, what paid to the city and the franchise is what it should still be. And lastly, 25 years, not 10. The reason 10 years is a good number is because it gives future councils a chance to make adjustments if what we're presently proposing doesn't work for the city or for the franchisee, for that. And once you come up with your final document, consider if they do not accept it, the Wickershams, initiating a eviction fee process. Put them on the line. So you can't operate there without a franchise. You let them go by already. And that's about it for me.
That's very, very helpful, thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody further? All right, I've not seen anybody pop up. Oh, I am. Certainly, response. Yes, good point. Welcome.
Nancy Falcom, 212 2nd Street East, Wabasha, Ward 1. I would like clarification. I could not hear the figures for the holdover tenant of what the rent would be for 2018. And then I'd like it clearly stated what it would then be for 2018 as a holdover tenant and 2019 forward. The second point I'd just like to bring up, and it may have been discussed previously, I haven't heard it tonight, is the Minnesota legislature gave Wabasha, if it works out, the funding for new docks. And I'm wondering if that has been under consideration if you rebuild or put in a new dock. I'm sure they haven't decided what kind, but if you look at storage of this present dock, what are you looking at in the future? And you might consider that when you look at your ability to use the inland waterway for that. Thank you.
Thank you. The Wickershams are here. Do you have any comment or question to address council? Anything further? All right, so I'm trying to be strategic about how we manage these questions. Certainly, Roland Hall outlined his very clearly. We've even got them in print. And the questions were who and how was it determined? And I should say, I think, John and Jeff, through their negotiation processes, deserve a considerable amount of acknowledgement for the effort. For the record, this dates back to early 2018, and their findings were made very public and very explicit in the October 2018 meeting. So we've had their best assessment of the information that they can glean in a similar process to the one that Mr. Wilson outlined in terms of going up and down the river, taking concerted effort to compare apples, oranges, bananas, and pineapples, as far as I could tell, being a member of the public listening to that presentation. I believe it was that meeting when council resolved that they wanted to see a professional appraisal. So for the public's knowledge, just because not everybody's been at all these meetings, a professional appraisal with a specialization, marina appraisals, was conducted. It included both the value for sale, because at the end of 2018, it wasn't clear whether that 2018 council had any will to see the sale of that. It was mentioned at a council meeting, but there was no action. So that was included in the appraisal, as was lease terms, as was the operating business of the current operators. So their financials and their business financials were taken into consideration in a thorough appraisal. We did not receive an alternate proposal from the Wickershams with any alternative appraisal information as was wished for. We did not. The council did not direct them in 2018 to accomplish that. It was desired. So I was a member of the public up through that 2018 period. So I had some of these same questions. I can answer the first one and welcome anybody to add. So who and how was it determined that the $25,000 would be the starting lease fee? That wasn't the starting lease fee that was originally discussed in a closed portion of the meeting, which by statute, council has the privilege of conducting when there is real property values being discussed. The lease agreement, the lease numbers that were arrived at in recommendation with our appraisal in front of us were 27,000. So we didn't start at 25. We started in keeping with the lease agreement, the appraisal and its appraised value of a lease agreement. So just for point of clarification. So that was a council discussion in a closed portion of a public meeting because that is by statute, that is that real property, those valuations of real property are protected, and it's to leave the city in a reasonable position to negotiate. If we put that information out there from the beginning, that this is our understanding of the value of the property, at least vulnerable to negotiate with the current operators or any other parties. So that's the why, I guess. You didn't say why, but that's my understanding of the why. So why, well, I should pause. Anything further from council to address with regards to that question? So the question was, who and how was it determined that 25,000 would be the starting lease fee?
I was just gonna comment, do we need to close the public hearing before we
Oh, yes,
discuss?
yeah,
Yes,
let's do
but-
that. Yes, we do that. We don't have any further comments, so let's close the meeting. I'm sorry, I have a little bit of glare there. It's
8:16.
16. We'll consider the hearing closed. And thank you very much. I really appreciate the public comment. I was very surprised and downright disappointed, I might say, a little uncomfortable. We haven't had any public comment in these prior meetings. I was very surprised. I know Tim and I are new to council, so there's a change of administration. We're looking for your feedback. We appreciate your comments very much. So thank you for reaching out individually. Some of you have done so, and I appreciate your time here tonight. Any comments to that question, anybody?
I think, was it 27.5?
Yes, yes. And if anybody's curious, just as a side note, we would like for that information to be public. We just don't, it just wasn't strategic for the city to put that out there in the public domain when that was the source of working information we had with which to evaluate the value. Why the 25-year lease versus the 1-year lease suggested by the Wickershams? So I was probably most disappointed, if I can be a little bit of a school marm, that we didn't have a very thorough discussion in what was our scheduled April council meeting. There was some misunderstanding on the part of the operators that they, weren't welcome to comment at that time. That is never the case. We always have public comment at the beginning of our meetings, so I apologize if that's ever misconstrued. We welcome that. That's what that section of the agenda is for. So we walked away from that April meeting, that scheduled first Tuesday of the month, with a sense that we were comfortable with the appraisal. It was the best information we had with which to work. It was a professional appraisal. It was very thorough. It's about this thick. And so we'd all, revisited that through the months of January through April. And what we found ourselves with is the need to, ensure that the operators understood that this would not continue indefinitely. And so in April, we decided that we needed to provide notice for eviction, not because we desire there to be an eviction. We want an operating marina. All of us on council agree that an operating marina is in the best interest of our citizens. But to be very clear, we needed to move forward with some dates so that we were being actionable about that. So we ended up with a special meeting about a week later where we rehashed this again and clarified that, we are, still in keeping with our best source of information, which is the appraisal that the city paid for. We again, inquired and encouraged why hadn't we seen a different appraisal, because the operators were far lower figures. Certainly they were not suggesting maintaining the prior agreement. So they were suggesting far lower figures, but didn't have an appraisal with which to counter the best information we had, which was the professional appraisal. So this is where I guess I don't know how to answer that question, why we didn't want the 1 year, because we've been, this council and the prior council have been beating around the bush with this current operator for over 12 months. And the process hasn't arrived closer to the figures that the former Port Authority has described. We haven't had any information that's led us in that direction. Thank goodness we haven't had information that's led us in the opposite direction of the 25 that we're looking at now. But the 25-year lease, I think you can tell there's still some question as to what's best there amongst council. We don't have total consensus on that. I think that we understand the spirit of it, but I would agree there's not consensus about that right now. But certainly we did not have consensus that a 1-year agreement was going to get us any further. That was the takeaway with action in that special meeting, which was an open meeting, but with, unfortunately not very much notice, the required notice. We did not have consensus that a one-year agreement would be an advantage to this process. Anything I'm missing there? So why no benefit to the city if the occupancy rate is higher than 65%? That's a new question. I would welcome council to answer that if you have any thoughts. The question
If
is,
it's above 65%, they pay the full franchise agreement fee, which was 25,000.
Right.
Or what we were planning on doing.
yeah. So this is sort of a more entrepreneurial question, if I might cast it in that light. And I really agree with Mr. Wilson about it being unfortunate that this was the process that was arrived at. You know, we're policymakers. This isn't the body that makes economic development interest-oriented conversations for the city. We are policymakers. We are responsible to our constituents. And I think that is the tone with which the negotiations, as far as I could see as a member of the public with, John as one of my representatives, I could see early last year that the spirit of this wasn't what I think 2007, it sounds like, getting ahead of it and being, having a business orientation toward it. I appreciate that thinking. That is not how this was handled in 2018. So that is a lesson learned. And what I said to Marty when he brought this up to my attention is, I don't care what the terms are, the clock starts now and we start thinking about it before it's expired and before there's a 10-year opportunity to terminate for any reason, and every year thereafter. Because I think having this tasked to council members puts this in a political realm, and we are responsible to a wide variety of constituents and are really responsible for operating in the best interest of everyone. I don't think it's a well-suited negotiation for council members to have. I agree with that. So I haven't heard it discussed in the terms of why wouldn't the city benefit. I think we've only heard it discussed in the public's interest. We would want there to be an operating marina if somehow the current operators or future operators, would struggle in those periods when occupancy is low. We certainly wouldn't want it to jeopardize a functioning marina if we can in any way play a role. If we get to that point and you think it's their fault, the city, as it's written, has the opportunity to terminate. But it's I'm hearing from John and Jeff's, reporting to us and updating, and even from the earliest that I learned of this as just a member of the public sitting in a city council meeting, that the spirit of this is we want a functioning marina. It's in the city's best interest. That's really the underlying motive, not as a revenue generator, which leads us to Wickersham's. Everyone knows why this is dragged on for form. Also don't know what that meant. And I don't know that any of us did. We were waiting on them and ended up in a special meeting to get a response. So none of us were pleased about that delay. Mr. Wilson is also correct, holding to the required meeting notices for council meetings just drags the process out unnecessarily. So we're essentially, we received the appraisal and immediately addressed it in our January meeting. Immediately had, I think in our February meeting, the closed portion of the open meeting. So we haven't taken a break on this. We would like to have had a little more response from the operators. We understand they're in a position to look after their best interest, but council hasn't delayed on this. I don't know what that means. So I don't know if you want to clarify what your understanding of it is, or if anybody else has but I don't think everybody knows why this is dragged on for performance. It's dragged on, it dragged on for the period of 2018 when, this is just the tail end of it. So any thoughts that I'm new in my role, so certainly I probably have blind spots. I just have, the public's knowledge up until January. Does the city have a plan for replacing lost revenue as a result of the proposed lease? That hasn't, as I mentioned, been the spirit of the discussion, but it could be placed on the agenda of the Port Authority, who's in a position to discuss that and think about that. But it's certainly been a question. I've heard that question voiced throughout 2018. Anybody want to comment? Anything further? Did I answer the questions? I know some of them, I don't have an answer for them. We don't have an answer about the question that number 4. We don't know what that intent was, and the answer clearly is no. The city does not have a plan for replacing the result of the proposed lease. That hasn't been the intent of the the negotiations. The intent of the negotiations is to get a functioning.
Mayor, yes, you did address the questions, and I'm satisfied with
Okay.
the explanations.
And did I misinterpret any of the questions or comments? Okay, good. I really appreciate this feedback. I wish it had come 6 months ago. It would have altered our course. I don't think it would have altered the marina agreement, or excuse me, the marina appraisal that we received. It is a thorough document. I encourage you to take a look at it when it becomes available. It was the same entity that appraised the Wabasha Marina, the south, downriver marina. It does, as Mr. Wilson articulated, it does compare up and down the river. It explains why certain other marinas might be comparable or not comparable. They're all different. I mean, to be fair, there's really no obvious comparison. That would be very handy. They have different business arrangements. They have different amenities. They have different locations. They have different clients. That's all taken into consideration. The specific amenities of our location, which I think John mentioned, he sort of feels like we are a better opportunity than other venues. That's even explicit in the appraisal. So, it's a certified appraisal. It was the best we had to work with. We are working with the public trust in mind. I think, if I can be just speculative, I wasn't here in 2008. It was certainly a different, 2007, 2008, certainly a different economic time and tenor, and a very different process. And I think that's key. But this is the process that council charged its task force with, and this is what we've arrived at. But these are important comments, and I appreciate, Mr. Britcher, your very specific notes on a couple specific parts of the language that I don't think council has discussed. And then Nancy had a couple questions. She wanted a repetition of what the holdover tenant amount would be. So for 2018, it would be the stated 25 with these terms. Is that right?
Yes, yes,
So technically, this would be year 2 of the contract, correct?
technically.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that clear, Nancy? So-
Mike, didn't you also say that since there was nothing formally about a holdover tenant, we couldn't hold them to the previous terms?
No, I don't, what do you mean by that?
Well, what I'm saying is when the $43,750 agreement expired,
Right.
I'm pretty sure you
Yeah.
said something that there's nothing explicit, so
No.
we would be able to hold them to the $43,750.
You could, I think a better way to say it is, you could have held them to a 43,750, but when you agreed to the $10,000 extension, you essentially, I don't know, if we litigate it, try to claim the 43,750, but when you agreed to that $10,000 extension, you were essentially agreeing to a rate less than what you had previously agreed to, so a court might say, well, no, you get the pro rata share of what that $10,000 represented. But that's only if you did declare them a holdover tenant, by the way. The gentleman made a comment, why haven't we given them eviction notice? We did give them an eviction notice. We've given them 2 eviction notices, and I think, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was June 19th
Yep.
is the date of the eviction. That's my memory. So we have done that.
So Nancy, to your question, the holdover rate is as stated in this current agreement. And your question was, and then the fee for 2019 as
Once you
stated.
took the 10, you avoided the rest. I understand that.
Well, no.
Because what I always did on a lease is I get to say the end of a 5-year lease and they had 20 acres on lease and they wanted to extend them for another year. You pay me ahead, and if we come up with something different, then we will reimburse you. If you don't, we take the equipment back right now.
Right.
You're done.
That's not what we did, so.
Well, that's what you should have done.
Okay, well, the
Well, we
10,
have no equipment to take back.
right. We don't own it.
Then vacate the
I'm
property.
just saying.
So the $10,000 though wasn't for a full year, so when I say it was just for a few months. So if you were to extrapolate that out, you wouldn't just get 10,000, you'd get like 30-some thousand, something like that.
You went from offense to defense right there.
Yeah.
And they're good businessmen. They drove a hell of a deal on you here. You don't realize it, but you've been hoodwinked.
Well, sir, I didn't negotiate.
But they've done a good job. I'm proud of them for that. But you guys, you let it get away on you.
Still the highest amount on the revenue. The highest up from La Crosse all the way to Redmond, it's still the highest.
I'm gonna give you a piece of paper
What's the procedure now? Do we,
Yeah.
We don't
I just
have
want
to
to
do
answer
anything.
Nancy's final question. I just want to answer Nancy's final question, which was to take into consideration the new dock. I thought about that too, Nancy. It's not clear to me what that dock structure will be, whether it'll be permanent or impermanent, and I think it's premature, but worth noting. It's sort of immaterial with regards to the overall cost, but I mean, just in terms of if that were a sticking point, I was thinking about that when we were first, talking about what would be sticking points for the city and what would we be willing to negotiate, but.
We did have a little discussion about that with the
Yeah.
Eagle Center, or the
Yep.
riverfront
Okay,
revitalization
right.
pre-design process, and there are considerations where you can actually build whatever we build down there to where the floating dock could stay in the water, because you'd have something jutting out that would protect it from ice.
Great.
So
That's
that was
down the road,
something that's
obviously.
down the road,
Yep.
but-
So I think the intent here was just to allow, to accommodate what the current practice and not end up with the city having a cost that was unexpected.
And additionally, I think that there's that gray area, we have that grant money from the St. Paul Port.
We need a little bit of quiet, just we need a little quiet to ensure that the public can hear council's response.
So, we have that money to set aside for the barge port, the $435,000 grant. So I don't know if Nancy was thinking about that money, or if she was thinking about,
Oh, good point. Yeah, there's both. There's a grant for the barge port. There's also this actual city dock that's being
Yeah.
re-envisioned as a part of the riverfront revitalization.
There's, the Eagle Center got a grant from the state, and there's a chunk in there for a dock.
Part that I assumed Nancy meant that we're responding to. So
Actually, the
since
city of Wabasha got a grant from the state.
Right,
Let's be
so,
clear.
so we have a closed public hearing. I hope I was responsive. I hope everybody's gotten a chance to correct me if I'm not accurate on the process of 2018, of which, Tim and I weren't apart. We had to catch up kind of quickly in 2019 to make sure we could be responsive. But council's addressed this as promptly and as thoroughly as we could with the most thorough information that we have, which is a professional appraisal that was procured by the city. And this is very important feedback, and it's good for council to hear that the members of the public disagree with process. That's fine. We need that feedback.
I can't,
process, what is the process now?
Well, to Mr. Wilson's point, I sat in the public forum also confused as to why negotiate in the format of council. It's a difficult thing. We aren't allowed to converse with each other about it. We can't. It puts elected officials in a role where they have to thoroughly evaluate sort of the business side of someone's operation, whereas they represent the public interest. I think that's been in the forefront, at least of how I've heard John characterize it, as thinking about this in the best interest of the city, not necessarily thinking that not taking on the stance, which is the charge of the Port Authority, to think about the economic vitality of the city, not thinking of it in that way. That's a different approach. Council people can come to the forum of council in disagreement of that.
I'm just wondering more on a process, on a procedure. So this was the first reading of this. Are we gonna have a new first reading, or we're gonna have a second reading with changes, or what?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, I've been thinking about that since you've all been talking. Yes, I mean, if you're gonna make a minor change to the ordinance, you could probably just do a second reading, an adoption. But if you're gonna start changing, essential terms of the agreement, you should have probably have another public hearing and another first reading, and then, bring it back for a second reading subsequent. So you have to do that in terms of timing. You have to do that pursuant to your charter. You have to have the second reading at least 3 days after the first reading, and then pursuant to statute, you have to publish the ordinance 10 days before you do final adoption. So if you were a statutory city, you're a charter city, but a statutory city could just have one reading and just publish it and adopt it. But you'd have to, when you get the final document, then you'd have to have a public hearing, have a first reading, which is what we were doing tonight. And maybe if you don't make changes, you would just have an adoption. It just depends on what you do. But I think at this point, procedure, I think more what you're getting at is how do you finalize this, or where do you go? And I think the council should have a discussion about it. I mean, I think we have a subcommittee, they've appointed a subcommittee to negotiate this. If this was negotiated by staff, like most agreements that in cities, I work in a lot of cities, most of the cities negotiate this at staff levels, but that's always at a staff level. I mean, you have your vote, you don't have to vote yes or no, you don't have to vote yes or no. So it still has to go to council for a vote. And I think it would be helpful for the committee, without violating the open meeting law, because we have a meeting tonight, to give them direction as to what you want them to do. And then it would also be helpful if the Wickershams respond to that if you change it, because it's hard to,
Negotiate in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Say something just from my perspective on the price difference from the last lease to this lease. I kind of walked into this not thinking how much money can I get out of the marina owner or future marina owners, but more like what is a fair price and a fair lease to give them and anyone else so that their business could operate. And I don't know where the cost comparisons came from that you guys had when you were seeing numbers like 40, 50,000. 25 from the numbers we had for all the leases up and down the river were lower than this, some substantially lower than this. And we started at the 27.5, like you said, and then it was a negotiation from that point. 27.5, 24, 25. And that was in an open meeting. And that came from. And then we threw in some fringe benefits on top of it as far as boat storage and in-kind services. So my mission was never to how much money can I get, how much money can the city get. It was, I want to give them a fair lease so they can be successful. So that's just where I was coming from in this whole thing.
And I think for me, I heard a lot of talk about, well, they were charged 40,000 the first time around, they could have got even more. But what it boils down to is we had, I thought was a fairly professional, or a professional appraisal by a company that does appraisals
Marinas.
on marinas. We looked up and down the river, and there was numbers all over the place, but they ended up saying, yeah, you could, the rates really range from 29,000 down to 20,000, but we recommend 27.5 because of whatever, all the other variables in there.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I think we had some substantial proof that 27.5 was
A reasonable place to begin.
figure. And so I think, yeah, so we started with that. And then through the process, we ended up with 25.
I think, was it in September that we did a presentation to the council?
It was October meeting.
And Jeff put together, and thank you for doing that again, the PowerPoint and our analysis of what we gleaned from all of the different leases up and down the river, what we took in, what we took out. And our results nearly mirrored what the professional appraisals is all, what result was in all three styles of appraisal. So it told us, and I think the reason why we decided to go with the appraisal was because you're just going on our assessment. Now we have something that's solid. And it was nice that both came in those same ranges.
And what we didn't have, and no one was tasked with it, and council didn't act on this, and the Port Authority didn't choose to do so, is we didn't have a 2007 or 2008 appraisal that would show us something different, that would suggest that the appraisal or the analysis conducted by the task force was not accurate. We didn't have that. We don't have that.
I appreciate that, and I understand where you're coming from. John Lineweaver had all that paperwork. We're unable to access it.
As were we, unfortunately. So, like I said, and we were very clear about this with the operators, we have the public's interest in mind, we have the public trust in mind, the public trust, and I appreciate Roland for asking, where is this information? The only reason that a closed meeting occurred to discuss that real property evaluation is because we didn't know what council was gonna have. There could have been a motion to sell. I mean, that was loosely commented in a prior council meeting. That didn't occur. But we had, that could have occurred, and that's where that statute protects the city and allows us to have the discussion of that real property evaluation. That's why it's there. So it isn't to keep anybody in the dark, it's to allow for the city to maintain its advantage that it has with regards to those negotiations. Otherwise, this has all been explicit in public meeting. And we've said again and again, we really want the public trust to be forefront and our process to be clear. And I hope it has been, to the best degree possible.
So Michael, what's the, if we want to propose changes, do we propose it to the subcommittee or propose it here and we redraft a new lease, or how do we want to handle this?
Well, you can make amendments to this lease. I wouldn't suggest redrafting the entire
No,
agreement.
that I don't want to do, yeah.
I think a lot of the general terms are, things you haven't brought up were heavily discussed, like what kind of requirements do we want them to have, bathrooms, that sort of stuff. Nobody's brought up any problems with that, and that's all been negotiated. So really, it boils down to a price, a term. Those are policy questions. I mean, I'm not a marina appraiser here, so you have to,
Take it at face value.
Take that,
I don't think that I've ever drafted
Responsibility.
many contracts. I've never stated you should do this at lease price. You have to come to a decision on that. I think there's been some good points brought about the lease term and, the term and the reduction clause. Now that, council remembers, that was negotiated at the last public hearing with the marina operators. And so that's why it's in the agreement. Ultimately, and that was at the whole council, but ultimately, you end up having to vote on it. So what I think is beneficial just to direct, I mean, I'm saying all this because Chad's not here essentially, but, to direct them and give them some direction, as to what you want to see in the agreement, what changes, and if there's just 3 or 4 sections you want changed, it would be helpful if you just kind of give
with their-
direction, as to if council could come to some consensus on that, and then we can redraft it, those sections. And if not, then fine, then we'll have a final reading.
I mean, it seems like one of the big concerns is that section 3.2 about the fee adjustment. So if we just decided at council tonight, couldn't we just say, scratch that? And the Wickershams are here, can't we ask them to say, are you good or not? So if we go anywhere with this, because otherwise we're just going down another hole.
Oh, I agree 100%. I mean, my only 2 concerns is the term length. I think it should be 15 and getting rid of 3.2. That would be my 2 suggestions.
So run
Otherwise,
it, do you wanna run it a 10-year, but then have,
Well, I mean,
after 10 years, have the option to get out at any given time, and at
and then we
15
could
years?
start the negotiations sooner than later for the next lease instead of just.
Yeah, that's fine.
I mean,
I don't have a problem with that, it's up to,
that's my opinion why I want 15. So we get to 10. If we want to get out both parties, we can get out.
But I think that's in there already, correct?
Yeah, you can get out after 10 already.
Yeah.
Right, so there's,
So I mean, if you put it to 15, then we allows us to start, thinking about negotiations at the.
well, you could do the
Well,
same thing, though. In
could.
year 11, you could say, we're gonna terminate the lease in year 12.
what you can't do is you can't assure that in 19 years, that council is paying attention.
I 100% agree, yeah.
So, but that being said, that's why the agreement is as long as it, so
Yeah,
something
I
in
mean, I like the
place.
safeguards that's in it, the
Yeah.
10-year thing and stuff. I mean, that's just my opinion would be that, those 2 things, but.
I can support that.
So, I'm sorry, I'm not tracking support what?
Well, I mean,
Supporting is
That's-
15
15
years and
years,
is
okay.
dropping in the 3.2.
And, yes, okay, that's,
and then otherwise,
That's what it is.
everything else is adopted as written.
Well, all that stuff that's not in there, like the property, the 2.
that's important, the note
Yeah,
that,
well, that's,
Oh, I'm sorry.
About
yes,
including-
you're correct.
yeah.
Those 3 parcels. or 2
Parcels.
parcels.
Go ahead, Marty. What do you got?
You're missing one thing you want to put in that lease is you didn't talk about the dredging of the harbor. Who's responsible?
that's DNR.
DNR?
The DNR is responsible.
Oh, it won't get done. Just indemnify yourself, like we had in the original lease. We offered to get the permit and to find a place for the spoils, which made me sweat to even say that. But we were not responsible for the dredging. Somebody else was. not to finish it.
Didn't we discuss that dredging?
I know it's come up when I
It
said.
has, and what came up was, is there was always this rumor of a harbor fund out there,
You'll spend
and there
more
isn't.
dredging than you'll ever make. The city of Red Wing in that little harbor where the boathouse, the yacht club spent $400,000 of their hard money. The city didn't pay anything because they had that in the lease. That's an issue
Throw
that's
it in
gonna
there.
come up in the 25 years.
Because you can't have a harbor unless you have sand in the harbor, then you don't have a harbor.
That's
Then you have an island.
But the boat can't come in, it's, yeah.
I gotta get in and out there.
Their past practices suggest that's, I mean, I can't speak to the history of how it's been
It
driven.
hasn't ever been dredged.
That originally was dredged to make it
Make it a harbor.
a
In the
harbor one
50s
time.
or
So many
40s,
times it's ever
yeah.
dredged, yes.
So over the last 60 years, it's been
It's,
at
yeah.
a decent depth ever since.
I mean, you've explored this further than others, so.
We can indemnify ourselves with it. I mean, we already done that based on
The language in the agreement currently?
language in the agreement.
Well, no, not what
Not
he's,
explicitly.
not what he's saying. What he's saying is, he doesn't want the city to be responsible
Right.
for dredging costs.
It's stated pretty clearly on that Red Wing lease that I gave you, just the one page in the bottom.
Yeah.
The mayor has that.
Saw that.
I shared it with them right away.
I think it's an important item, and we thought that was a big issue in '07 too. The other thing in '07 and '08, remember, we were in economic boat sales were way down, boat sales are way up. Marinas have wait lists. Big boats really sell now.
I mean, I don't have a problem putting in that dredging, whatever the wording is.
Indemnification of dredge costs.
That's fine.
Well, why don't you direct us to look at that? I mean, I
Yes.
don't know anything
Well,
about it.
then I move that we direct staff to look at that dredging piece of it and add it to the agreement if necessary.
Yeah, you could just take it right out of the other one and take a
And
look
I
at it.
direct staff to, yeah, that would be my.
I second the motion.
Okay, so to have a thorough motion, you're proposing I think, I hear you saying, the removal of section 3.2,
So my proposal would be the removal of 3.2 in the current lease. or
change of
proposal.
terms to
Change of
15.
terms to 15, and direct staff to look at the dredging wording that we could potentially add if necessary.
And to address the issue of the parcels that appear to be currently
Yes, and
utilized.
4, yep,
To include those in
to include those parcels that were.
the
identified.
description.
So just to be clear, I mean, that's a good idea. I didn't know those existed, but
didn't
we used the parcels from the last marina franchise agreement. I mean,
Well, I
So I
think
thought they
those
were
three
caught.
should be looked at least.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
if it's deemed not necessary to add, fine, but I know everybody uses it, so we might as well add it,
Boats parked on it.
so,
Well, just for insurance purposes, it makes sense.
And that covers it.
those 4 things, yep.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Do we have any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Nay.
No from Councilman Moyer. Okay, so we'll revisit this again.
Again, another thing too is, what about the beach park area, 1.3.1?
Well, I guess I don't understand, isn't that correct? In the way I read it,
Northeasterly and northwest shoreline of adjacent beach
I
property.
mean, we're not putting anything permanent in there, we're not, the way I
this is-
read it is we have the ability to
Build
dock it
place.
wherever we wanted to, if it doesn't interfere with the channel. That's my,
That's what we're trying to do.
I mean, isn't
We're trying
that
to just
clear
be-
enough? I guess I.
Clear to me,
Am I
Are you okay with
misreading?
it, the way it stands? That's all I'm asking.
I am.
This is the way I'm reading this, is that we could store it as long as we don't eliminate the channel to the 75 feet.
Okay.
That's the way I'm reading it, unless I could be wrong.
no, I mean, this
That's why it's written that way.
has been rewritten a few times.
Yeah, it has.
Basically, we had it written a different way where there was none of this language in there. This section, that part didn't even exist. The marina company, Parkside, added all in.
So we massaged
objected to
it.
it and took it out or changed it.
Now it's there again.
And then they objected to it, and their claim was that there was DNR regulations that prohibited, that required a certain number of feet opening, and by docking the boat along the shoreline, it would violate those DNR regulations, which is a whole other problem, because we can't, I mean, in this agreement, it says they can't violate the law.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So there's a whole other problem there. So then we responded and asked, where are those regulations? Because I would want to read them then, because I don't want us to, I mean, if you're currently, so I understand it, you know, pipe in, but you're currently putting your dock in the water over the winter. And so if we're currently violating DNR regulations, that's a problem. That being said, the way it's drafted now, you're right, we changed we massaged the language back to basically allowing the dock that you have, but you wouldn't be able to put any new temporary.
That's the way absolutely. Well,
I mean,
first,
we're just looking for winter, being able to
yeah.
legally
Is what we're looking
let
for.
our floating docks.
I guess I
float
didn't have a problem with the
in
wording,
water,
so
You know?
that's the way I read it. But
Don't we have property above the dike, where,
We don't wanna take it out of the water, though.
No.
no,
You can float it back around the corner.
back
yeah.
around the corner of the
gotcha.
dike.
But you don't want to.
Condos used to do that in the past, I don't know if they still do, but why is that?
It's just more secure in the harbor. This is safer. You know, too much movement out there.
You can get movement anywhere, honestly.
Okay, anything further? Anything further on that point?
Well, I mean, are you guys,
Well, you just draft it and we'll send it over, and, I mean, it is what it is. This is what we've got for an agreement now.
well, I think that what Tim is saying is that not to change it.
Not, that section is, we have no action on that
my
section.
opinion would be, I thought it was written clear enough
Yes.
to me. I wouldn't change that section.
And the problem with that is they're not agreeing to it. They disagreed with that.
Well,
So
I
it might
mean,
not
it's
be
in
an
good faith that we're not gonna leave anything in the water on a permanent
It's
basis.
not, we're not putting a dock in the middle of the summer over the 4th of July there.
Nor are we putting a new dock in
No.
across the marina on the shoreline, because that would never even remotely come close to 75 feet. Because I can't believe the one that exists now is close, is far enough. I mean, so that would cover from all the way from the bike path all the way to the channel, basically.
And the campground ordinances now talk about, there's no ability for them to put.
Put a
any-
dock out
a dock in there
there.
anyway,
Oh.
so we've got that whole part covered anyway, so.
Yeah, I'm with you. I guess draft
Alright.
it, we can talk
So,
about it.
so are these changes gonna 2 readings again, or
I-
just one reading, one more reading?
I think because you're adding property to it, I mean, you're talking about 3 additional lots, that's significantly changing the licensed
Have to have
premises.
2 more start all over again next month, so we dragged out, so we're gonna have to, send more eviction letters out, so I mean, what do we do?
Yeah,
We should have a special meeting.
right.
We'll end up with a special meeting promptly after, within, per charter, second reading it.
10 days.
Yeah,
Well-
3 days after the first reading.
Okay. I mean, my concern is they're not gonna agree to this stuff. I mean, they haven't said anything, and they're here, and there's.
Well, they're
public
here,
hearing.
they could
Well, I
answer.
mean,
We would appreciate it if you do have anything to share. I mean, we would welcome that at this time. That's what these scheduled meetings are for, so that the public has the opportunity to
We're
hear it.
not understanding the 3 lots, we understand one of them, but I don't know where the other 2 are.
There,
I mean, the one we do use, but if you turn that over to us, that's gonna take all your parking away from your boat ramp.
Yeah, that's used for public
2 are
and,
on Third Street. And the other one's right, it's by the house with the red roof.
We don't use that.
Yeah, see, I don't know.
Somebody else, I think, pulls their boats down in there, after we shrink wrap them,
Okay,
then they pull them down there and park them.
all right.
you use the one that's adjacent from the old shop though, right?
That's the only one we use, but that's the one that the boat ramp people use.
Well, that's what,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's public
The only
park.
thing we do is pull the ones off, in the spring, we pull boats off there and put them down there to stage them before we put them in the water. Then after that, they're gone.
I just
Public
don't look
parking.
at it. If we don't include them, we don't include them.
So it sounds like we shouldn't include them now.
Well, I don't know, they're using that one right on Third Street.
But so is public people using the boat ramp there.
Well, yeah.
So how do you separate it out then?
Right.
Public use, if they're franchised to use it, then they can use it as they see fit, and there's loss of public parking.
It's a factual question. This is just a factual question as to whether it's logical in the agreement or not. And I don't know enough about it, so you'd have to
I don't think it's, I think that because of the nebulous use of it by both public and franchise, and they stage boats there, they do, but there's plenty of citizens, including myself, that would launch the boat, and that's where I'd park if I could get a slot over there, if someone else hadn't already taken.
Fine, and if we have to have another reading, then look into it and bring it back, is that's my comment.
So,
I mean, all I said is look at it, I didn't say
so if you
fully
want,
had to
if
agree
we
to it.
think we need to add it, we
We'd add it as
add it.
appropriate.
If we don't think we need to add it, then we don't.
Don't add it.
All right.
I mean,
Is that
since we're
okay?
probably gonna have
Dig into it a
another first
little bit
reading,
and
we
go
might as
from
well do
there.
it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine, it's just you're delegating to them, and then if they don't add it, we should come, the committee should come back with a reason why.
Correct.
we didn't add it.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure of the 3 full lots we're talking about here, so that's why I would just
Right.
direct the
I
staff.
gotta get on Beacon and look a little
So-
bit, so.
That's all
Do
if
we
you
have
add,
to
you add, you don't.
amend that motion then, since we
'cause
already
I think-
made it?
You don't even need to make a motion, you're just directing us to do
All right.
Yeah,
something.
we just direct it.
It's fine.
Good.
Great. Okay, anything further? I really appreciate the scrutiny. I think this is healthy to have this as a function of public comment. If nothing further on the marina lease agreement, we have general business. We have the resolution awarding the bid for the 2019 street project. Brian is, city engineer, is unable to attend tonight. He added an update to council. The 2019 street project should tentatively start in August, and an informational meeting will be scheduled prior to the start of the project, once a detailed schedule is drafted, so the public can ask questions about that street project. And I think under that same item, he indicates that the LRIP funding was increased from $281,000 to $295,000 to match as-bid amounts, which is good news. Anything further?
And that's the money to do the truck route behind,
12th Street and.
behind the ambulance
As
garage.
as presented in the prior
Dollar General.
Yep.
meeting. Probably says in our minutes from
Yeah, it does.
the last meeting.
Allocated an eighth or something.
Okay. So, yeah, just for the public's benefit, the attached bid recommendation, which was presented to us prior, is included in the packet. There were 2 bids received for the 2019 street utility improvement project on April 17th, and Mr. Malm recommends awarding the bid to Rochester Sand and Gravel for $1,374,616.05. And we could entertain a motion to approve this resolution awarding the bid for the 2019 street and utility improvement project to Rochester Sand and Gravel.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Falcon, we have a second from Sulla. Do we have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And then we have the 2019 through 2022 City of Kellogg Police Contract. The summary of the item is that our city administrator Chad Springer and police chief Joe Stark negotiated the attached 2019 through June 2022 City of Kellogg Police Contract. The 2016 through 2019 contract per month charges were $3,297.84 for the first year, $3,363.79 for the second year, and $3,431.07 for the third year. The 2019 through 2022 contract states that the per month charges will be $3,568.31 for the first year, $3,639.68 for the second year, and $37,012.47 for the third year. The terms of the contract are in the packet, the scope of services. Do you have anything to add, Joe? Did you want to add anything? Scott?
Is it adequate? Is it gonna work?
It's, yeah, I mean, it's, historically, that's what we've always done with them, 3-year contract. Me and Chad sat down and that, those raises were historically what we've done, to get finances up to match where our increases were. 4%, 2%, 2% is, I believe, exactly what we did on the last contract as well.
And again, just for the public benefit, the, details relating to, response to calls is all articulated in the contract, if you're interested in that detail.
I'll move to approve the Kellogg Police Contract.
Second.
We have a motion from Tim, we have a second from John. Do we have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We have approved police contract. And I think this is where we inserted couple more general business items moved from the consent agenda.
Yeah, consent agenda.
So from the consent agenda, we had, if you want to go back in your packet, we had the fireworks display request for donation.
And the reason I asked this to be pulled is because the fireworks display agreement says on paragraph 2, the buyer shall pay $6,000 in full by June 4th. So I know it was the intent to contribute 2,000, but what it's saying is we're gonna pay 6,000. So just so you know that, is that if we don't get those donations, we pay the difference.
And just for the benefit of the discussion, 2,000 was budgeted for 20. Currently, 2,100 has been received in donations for fireworks.
Historically, we've never not reached the 6,000. In fact, we have $1,000 left over from last year.
Okay, but I think when you lead up to this, you should say we're going to cut a contract for 6,000 and hope that we get 4,000 and we shouldn't say we're throwing in 2,000, because we're not, we're throwing in 6,000.
So, we don't have a proposed, we don't have any proposed action on this, because it's part of the consent agenda.
We have to approve it.
You have to prove
Yeah,
it.
You have to approve it now, because it's been pulled.
so I make a motion that we
Yeah,
approve
that's what I
it,
mean.
that we approve to pay $6,000 to the fireworks display people and any contributions
That would,
to
I'll second.
support this.
so we have a motion to approve $6,000 as stated in the contract. We have a second, we have a motion from Falcon, we have a second from Woodley. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thanks. I appreciate that clarification. I think that too would be helpful. We just can't remember historically, what happens. Certainly those of us who are new appreciate that background. And then we have the Falcon Youth Baseball Association temporary on-sale liquor license application, which was priorly in the consent agenda at 8.5, if you're looking for it.
So I think before the city goes ahead and approves this, I think they should get an idea of what we're approving, and I don't know what we're approving so far as it's a liquor license for Little League.
I can clarify.
Gonna be a picnic, or what's it gonna be?
I'm not on
Oh,
the,
picnic.
I'm not on the board anymore, but they're planning an adult event the Friday night of their annual baseball tournament. So it's adults after the kids are gone, so,
I just thought maybe we should explain it a little bit more on the
gotcha.
application.
I think they should sell beer all weekend. They make a killing, so, new uniforms and the whole thing.
And I welcome anybody who can raise money for the
their-
Youth Baseball Association. I just thought we should clarify what we're spending that liquor license, or what we're granting the liquor license for.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I can verify that Troy cornered me and asked, how do we go about doing this? And I said, do it quickly, because you'd want it on our agenda for this month, so he did.
Okay.
So with that explanation, I'll move to approve it.
All right, I'll second.
We have a motion from Walrick, we have a second from Woodley. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. They'll be happy, so they can go on with their event. And then, taking a look at the donations, which are always
We never got beer?
Yeah, I actually had the blame.
a wonderful pause for appreciation. We have some significant donations we would entertain to accept. Contributing to the library, we have $25 in memory of Tom Graff by Rollin Hall, $100 from Bill and Gloria Hager, $20 from the Wabasha Kellogg Community Foundation, $1,140 from the Friends of the Wabasha Library, $1,000 from the Ruth Doffing Foundation, $1,140 from the Friends of the Wabasha Public Library. Additionally, for the library's summer reading program, specifically $750 from the Rotary Club, $300 from Burkett Raymer VFW Post 4086, $200 from the Wabasha Fire Relief Association, $100 from Kellogg's Fire Relief Association, $100 from Heritage Laundromat, $200 from Amy Schertz. I hope I'm not pronouncing that incorrectly. $85 from Davidson and Associates, $75 from Paul Bush Auto, $50 from California Overland, $50 from Interstate Building Supply, $50 from Perry Dental, $50 from Wabasha Dentistry, $50 from Binner Appliance, $100 to the Wabasha Fire Department from Greg Vandemark and Jane Wegener at Heritage Laundromat. Wabasha Ambulance Service received a donation of one Greg Vandemark and Jane Wegener, and another one to the Police Department for $100 from the same party. The Ambulance Service received $500 from Randy and Jane Johnson. The Riverboat Days Wabasha Chamber of Commerce received $500 from Burkett Raymer VFW Post. toward the fireworks donation, $800 from the VFW, $500 from WNB Financial, $300 from Dick's Fresh Market, $500 from Kellogg's Fire Department Relief Association, and for engineering fees, their donation for proposed road per petition, $100 from Game Day Sports LLC, $100 from Vicky Moore, $100 from Wayne and Marcia Fleener, $400 from Dennis Bashan, $100 from Gerald and Linda Whalen, $100 from Barbara Hansen, $100 from Roger and Christine Fossum, and toward the splash pad, $5,697.27 from Mr. John Doffing, toward the Wabasha County Fair Board and Ski Hill, $5,697.27 from Mr. John Doffing, and Falcon Youth Baseball Association, $2,000 from Mr. John Doffing. Very much a pleasure to read these, and I would entertain a motion to accept the donations. That was simultaneous. Craig caught my ear first because of the sound of, the travel of sound. So we have a motion from Falcom, a second from Moyer. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. And that concludes our business. Do we have any announcements? And we have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion. Second.
I'll second.
We have a motion to adjourn from Friedmeier, second from Waller. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Hey.
Thank you.
They all brought up.
They did, and that's why we should hear this.